Let's go beyond the connection. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have two important guests that are on. We have Julian Jaquez. And Julian, you are president of the BCN network. And you are constantly in the market selling network infrastructure solutions. I mean, let you talk a little bit more about that. And so you've got a really good pulse on the market, what's happening today, what's needed, where the market is going, what the trends are. And we also have on Dave Idle. Now, Dave, you are the Chief Product Officer at Bigleaf Networks. You are network infrastructure technology company and service. And I'd love to start out. And if you wouldn't mind, Julian, if you could explain a little bit the role that BCN plays in the market. And then Dave, I'll have you do the same thing. And then we're going to start talking about the network of today, perceptions that are latent, that are maybe holding us back from what we should be doing and accomplishing today with our networks. But I'm going to start, Julian, just a little bit on BCN networks and what you're doing in the marketplace.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Great to see you, Dave. Sure. So BCN from the marketplace, what we're seeing and what we're really involved a lot with is really what I would call managed connectivity services, where we are bringing in multiple forms of internet connections and then bringing those together in a managed and secured environment. And we can go from just really starting with some basic monitoring to overlaying those connectivity or those connections with an SD-WAN component onto security and kind of up the stack. But at the end of the day, it's really about perfecting that customer experience as it relates to their connectivity so that they can accomplish the things they need to in their business, as well as allowing us to really enable them to do the things that they need to with that kind of managed and secured connections. We very much like the term unbreakable connectivity or unbreakable internet access. Dave's company allows us to accomplish that. And, in today's environment, that whole concept is built around two connections and really bringing together two connections to function as one. And I think what we wanted to talk a little bit about today is really wireless being a true option for that one of those two connections. And you even said it earlier, it's not lesser than, but it's equal to a wired connection, and really how that's viewed today in the marketplace. As an example, we talked about an opportunity, real nice opportunity that we were involved with, about 70 locations, domestic and international, and it involved an SD-WAN overlay. And really, at the end of the day, that 70 locations represented about 140 connections. Again, two forms of connectivity at every location, overlaid with an SD-WAN solution to allow really that concept of unbreakable internet. And what's interesting is when we did that deal originally back here in early 25, the two connections were wired. As that relationship's evolved, the conversation is now around an alternate medium, meaning wireless, and how to best leverage that in that two connection environment. And we encounter that all the time today with a lot of business customers.
I want to come back and ask a little bit more about that application. But Dave, I'd love to have you kind of dovetail on what Julian is talking about here and how you help BCN from that kind of dual wired and wireless systems, and explain what Bigleaf does.
Yeah, you bet. I love that example, Julian. We're seeing it more and more. The use cases have expanded dramatically, I would say, even over the last 24 months or so. I originally came from Verizon, and we were trying to build a product just like the one that Bigleaf has. Essentially, what we were looking to build that for was to create a unified experience across all the different connections that a customer might be able to have. At that time, we had things like dedicated internet, we had fiber internet, we have wireless internet, both 4G and 5G, and all of these things had completely disparate customer experiences. What Bigleaf was allowed customers to do is create a unified experience. And so you can connect up to 4 different connections to the Bigleaf device, and it feels like you have one single ISP that's managing all of those different connections. In addition to that, we can make it smarter, we can make it more efficient, and we can improve the overall SLA for some of those core connectivity options. So a lot of customers are still stuck with cable, they're still stuck with DSL, DSO, legacy broadband services, and as Julian mentioned before we jumped on the call, copper services. And those copper services really drive a lot of operational costs to businesses. So there's constant outages, customers have issues, and we can come in again with that secondary connection, which is now really focused on wireless, and that can be 4G, 5G, and even satellite to this degree, because it is a very ubiquitous technology. And so unlike a lot of other technologies where maybe you have multiple locations and you want to offer that secondary connection, and over here it's AT&T, and over here it's Verizon, and over here it's fiber connection, over here it's something else, you can really offer a wireless connection across all those locations and create a single unified experience, improve the overall SLA for those customers in a very seamless way. And so what we're starting to see is a lot of the carriers are coming in, they're saying, hey, look, there's already an incumbent in place and we really can't displace them, but we can improve that customer experience by adding a wireless connection. And the only way they can really do that is with a solution like ours, where they bring our device in and they plug in their DSL connection with a Verizon wireless connection. And then we're also seeing a lot of the carriers that are looking to expand their wireless networks, and they really can't do it fast enough. And it isn't a capital issue for a lot of these major carriers. These carriers are $150, $200 billion businesses. They have a lot of cash to spend. The issues now become a construction problem. They can't build the towers fast enough to accommodate the demand on those towers. And so what we're able to do is come into a market where they don't have a higher speed option available yet in 5G, and you can bond or aggregate two connections together, say two 200 megabyte wireless services together, and could create a 400 megabyte service. Or you can connect up to four 200 megabyte services and create really compelling offer against the cable codes and the fiber codes that might be playing in that market that you never were able to compete with before. And you can do it today. You don't have to wait for a network build out. You don't have to wait for anything. It's available right now. And we're starting to see a lot of excitement, a lot of traction in this space. Very exciting.
So, Julian, I'd love to the adoption more and more of wireless. And you talked about that installation across 70 different locations. It started out with two wired and you moved to wired and wireless from a two wired solution. Can you take us through the thinking on that and the rationale of why you did that?
Yeah, again, I think the customer's experience, like Dave was saying, really drives you to solve for these challenges. And when you're faced with construction, when you're faced with how quickly can we get a site active, how long is that site going to be around? Meaning maybe it's a temporary or it's project-based location where it's not going to be there from a longevity or a long-term standpoint. Wireless immediately comes into the conversation. We particularly like the 5G component, 5G service delivery, if you will. We find that it can stand right up against the wired connection and even the fiber connections. As Dave said, their ability with Bigleaf, our partnership with them, our ability to be able to do both mediums at the same box or inside the same unit is critical. In the past, we would actually have to deploy a separate standalone wireless router or wireless device so that it could become effectively wired into the solution. Now, Dave and his team have taken all the noise out of that and said, hey, let's just do it all in our single box solution. So that just pushes you towards that. As the technology gets there, the connectivity is already there. It's really incumbent upon companies like ours to bring that to the customers and really make it a real time. As Dave said, it's available today. It's not something that we need to think about for the future. I really like it too, because you get into, and I'm speaking specifically to Bigleaf's solution, is you get into it's network agnostic as well as security agnostic. And it really sits right there in the middle and allows you to just bring multiple forms of connections together. They feel and operate as one, as Dave said, like a single ISP solution. And then it overcomes shortcomings effectively. I always say you take two best efforts and make them great effort is the reality of it, what we can do today. And again, it's all about solving for the customer. That is what drives the motivations. What drives it is, can we solve for the customer's needs? and can we create a great experience for them? I was talking about a bigger one earlier. Last week, a smaller opportunity, 7 locations, 14 connections, wireless in the mix. What's great for a provider of connectivity like BCN is the technology's doubling the demand. If you think about it, 3 years ago, these were single run solutions, one connection. Just the technology and the customer experiences is doubling the demand. And it's no longer one connection, it's now 2. So the RPU, the ARPU goes up for those that are tracking those types of things. And the reality of it is some of these services, the price point is contracting. So the customer is actually getting more for less or more for the same by adding the second connection. So we see a lot of demand, like Dave said, we see a lot of demand now coming for this.
So, Dave, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I have a question to add on top of it, but I wanted to give you an opportunity first.
Yeah, let me just touch on it if you don't mind, Steve. But on top of what BCN is seeing, there's sort of the tip of the spear here in terms of the customer experience, what customers are asking for, and what the customers actually need in the marketplace. And we're starting to see that disseminate into the major carriers right now. And the carriers are looking at this going and say, wow, BCN is offering 2 connections. One of them is not us. How do we make both of these connections? So and AT&T wants both of those connections to be AT&T and Verizon, T-Mobile, and on down the line with Starlink and others. And they're starting to look at opportunities to say, hey, look, instead of selling one gross ad or one connection to a customer, I can sell 2 or 3 or even 4, and I can create a hardened wireless experience for these customers that builds and generates lots of confidence. Where in the past, as you mentioned earlier on the call, wireless was seen as the secondary. It's a backup. It's not necessarily utilized for primary. Now I can create a hardened wireless solution with multiple connections through the Bigleaf solution. So it's pretty exciting, but it started really tip of the spear, BCNs and the customers that are out there asking for this. And now it's starting to move its way up the stack into some of these major carriers. Pretty exciting.
So if I could ask a clarification question there, because Julie, you talked about active networks and you're talking about like 3, 4 active ISPs coming in together. And my takeaway from what you just said, Dave, was that multiple ISPs layered into one solution through Bigleaf can provide the kind of unbreakable connectivity that you would have typically expected if you only had a wired connection. That is the kind of reliability that you can get today.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly what JJ is referring to. And that's exactly what I was describing. The hardened connection equals the unbreakable connection. And it creates that advanced SLA, that increased confidence for customers. Yeah, no doubt.
And there is a big push on edge computing, and there's lots of locations that don't have the hardened wired connection that we would want. You can't get the T1 lines. So there are many applications in many different companies where we would want to rely on a active wireless connection. If you could talk a little bit about that, Dave, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. In those scenarios, there's a couple of different use cases. We have temporary locations. So think about big conferences and things like that. We're setting up hundreds of booths in a central sort of big open area. The wireless is really going to be the only option. They can't have 200 wireline connections in a place like that. And you might only be open for 2 or 3 days. And then the next customer comes in and they have their conference and so on and so forth down the road. So these temporary pop-up sort of locations, like a big conference, or in the middle of a mall kiosks. Almost every single mall kiosk that you see is going to have some sort of wireless connection associated with it because they can't wire in cable or fiber into the middle of the hallway. So there's lots of those types of use cases. And then there's customers that are just looking for general ubiquity. So think about a construction trailer. I might have 200 construction trailers dispersed all across the United States, and I need to have some sort of ubiquitous connectivity option. And that might be a Starlink, it might be 5G, it might be 4G, it might be some other satellite type of solution that they can disperse across all those different locations. And some of the issues and challenges in some of those rural locations where they might be popping up and infrastructure is not quite there is they need multiple connections so that they have the right bandwidth to support whatever applications they might be running at those locations. So there's lots of opportunity. And I know, Julie, you've got quite a few use cases that you've run up against too that are primarily focused on that wireless connectivity as well.
Part of our business, we have some legacy business with us, which is what I would call the legacy copper POTS lines. And right now we're going through a big transition, really a technology change, a big shift where in POTS replacement solutions. And those POTS replacement solutions are the primary form of connectivity is a wireless connection. So every single location that we convert out from copper POTS line connectivity to a POTS replacement solution, the primary form of connection converts to wireless. And that's every location we send out. All of these applications, they all have wireless component into them. It really, in today's world, and that's POTS replacement, it's actually the primary. But as Dave said, you can wind up with other scenarios where initial deployment is wireless. Maybe the entire deployment's wireless because of it's event-based or time-based or something of that nature. It's really interesting. The other thing I would also add is that what I really like about it too is, again, if you overlay it with the Bigleaf technology that we do, you actually come in wireless or wired on the public IP side. And then once we get to Bigleaf, we can then go direct cloud connect. So the customers with applications in the cloud, once we get onto the Bigleaf network, we immediately can then establish routes and establish connections for the customers to get to their cloud-based applications. And really it goes end to end. Again, what are we trying to solve for? What does the customer need to do? You get the front side of that connection, if you will, meaning all these forms of connectivity. Then you hit that SD-WAN overlay, and now it's where am I going on the backside? What do I need to accomplish on the backside? And like I said, what we've got going with Bigleaf, we've got direct cloud routes. Dave knows all about this stuff because he's built it. But those are all just selling points to customers on the front side as well as the backside, that hardened front side coupled with where are we going to go on the backside once we get you to the network.
Everything that we're talking about here, nobody wants to add complexity. Nobody has an IT department that covers all like the 70 construction trailers, Dave, that you were talking about there. We want something that's low complexity, that's plug and play, that makes a significant difference on performance of the network right away. Can you talk, Julian, to this solution? And is it plug and play? Does it reduce complexity? All those things I was just talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, I don't like the term plug and play, but it is as close to that as you can get. Inevitably, you have to have a deployment event, but it's as close as you can get to that. You really get the connectivity there, bring in the device, then the overlay. And then what I really would say is where I think a big part of the benefit comes with when you experience your first challenge. That's really where the solution shines. Whenever you have 3 connections and the backhoe out front just dug up your wired connection, and you're now 2 weeks away from it being replaced. Whenever your copper facility went out of service again in a major rainstorm because the conduit was flooded. When those events happen and this hardened connectivity on wired and fiber solutions, those things, that's when I think the true value of it comes through, because the customer, the resiliency of the solution allows the customer to just keep going on, keep their business going forward. As we were talking about earlier, I was reviewing this morning service trouble ticket history, and you can just see from the nature of the product and the quantity of service or trouble repair tickets, you can see that wireless and fiber have the lowest volume of activity in that space. And then you can see that copper and coax will actually have the higher volumes. And so again, it just goes back to that experience that you can have with the customer and trying to get those that fail you or more likely to fail you out of the solution, and then trying to build the solution around, we're going to plan for a challenge. That's effectively what we're doing. We're planning for something not to go right, but it not affect you. That's 100% about what we're doing here.
Dave, I'd love to hear your thought for the Bigleaf side on the customer experience that you're designing. Julian has talked very eloquently about what that means to the end customer, but I'd love just to hear a little bit of your internal thinking about the experience that you're designing.
Yeah, I love it. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. So when we talk about the product roadmap, and Julian's probably seen me present this more than once, more than 10 times possibly, but we have a slide that we start out with that is all about our core tenets. And the core tenets associated with Bigleaf are keeping things simple for the customer. And Julian, I'm with you. I don't like the term plug and play either because it doesn't speak to the complexity that we solve for on the back end. And there's a lot of complexity. So Julian mentioned resiliency. He mentioned prioritizing those cloud applications on the back end. And he mentioned the critical infrastructure support related to POTS replacement lines. So critical infrastructure is being replaced with wireless solutions. And so we need to make sure that all those things are working and operating effectively. So we have our own cloud-based network with 9 distributed POPs across the United States. And our solution speaks from the endpoint of the customer all the way out to our POPs and is distributed into the cloud solutions, as Julian mentioned. So we're paired with 155 different cloud applications. Those are all critical cloud applications that customers use to run their business. And so we're using dynamic routing, both from the edge to the POPs, to route that traffic dynamically for those customers. So there's a lot of complexity that happens between the customer location and our POPs and across our entire network. And we're making that all completely seamless to the customer at the customer site. We may not be pure plug and play, but it's essentially we configure the device, we ship it to the customer sets it up and provision it. So from a customer point of view, it's as simple as a 5-minute setup. So we make things as easy as possible. And that is what our core tenets are all about. It's all about simplicity. If somebody else is doing what we're doing, we want to take that use case and we want to make it better. We make it easier. We want to make it more efficient overall. So that's our purview from a product development perspective. And that's the complexity that we take and simplify it down to the customer point. That's all we ever think about, just consistently as we're developing new products. We're working with Julian's team on a regular basis on what's the next feature you want to see? What's the next product you want us to go create? Or what's the experience that you guys want to have and that you want your customer to have associated with these products? And so they say, hey, these guys, over here might be doing it okay. And so we want to take that. We want to make it 10 times easier. And that's really our overall objective.
That's interesting, Dave, because I hear you describe it like that, because as I hear you describe it, you are accounting for BCN as your customer, as part of the experience, because I know our business together and how we partner and how we have just the great interactions. But as a part of that, you also have to account for the experience of the customers that we bring, the actual end users. So you have a two-headed snake there that you have to get your hands around, not just us, but our customers. I never kind of thought of it with that regard.
Absolutely. From day one, that's what we think about.
I would like to ask you guys, because we've covered a lot of territory here, and our poor human brains can remember about 2, maybe 3 things at a time. If there was one takeaway that you wanted the audience of technology professionals that are managing their networks today to take away from the conversation about unbreakable connectivity and the role of wireless, what would that be?
Steve, to answer your question, what I would say as an IT professional, what I would say on the consumption side of the equation is, I would say, first and foremost, you deserve it. Your business deserves the ability to be able to rely upon its internet connectivity, that it will be resilient, that it will overcome challenges, and that you will be able to show up and do your business. And you can rely on that and you can build around that. So I would say number one is I would take the view of, this is what I deserve. So I need to find a partner or a company that can do this with us or for us. And then the second thing I would say along in support of that is that absolutely the technology and the connectivity options, they are there, readily available. You just need to partner with the right consultants, technology advisors. You can absolutely achieve this, where you can take something that maybe you were worried about every day. Oh, is the network going to be up today? You can put that on the back burner and you can focus on the other things that your business needs. So I would say that both of those 2 things. And then the third thing that I would add, more along the lines of what we've been talking here, is that wireless as a form of access, as a medium, is absolutely there today. It's readily available, and that you should absolutely check your location address, confirm what level of wireless service is there, and then really embrace that as a form of connectivity. And we've seen it. We happen to do business with AT&T and wireless in this space, in the 4G, 5G space, and we see it getting nothing but better. And the fact of the matter is they will compete against each other, which is a good thing. And they exist in the same markets, in the same place. So they challenge each other to be better every day. And to me, that's actually a good thing, because that means that the consumer, the end users, are getting the best that's available. They want to monetize those networks. There's a lot of infrastructure investment going in there. And we absolutely view that as an option. So I would say those three things. You deserve it. The technology and networks are out there and available, and that you should absolutely consider wireless as an option, as a connection option or a connection medium.
Great. Dave, I'd love to get your takeaway that you want everybody to have.
Yeah, I think Julian totally hit it. So the wireless carriers are out there competing with each other, and they're getting better and better every day. I read an article the other day that said the wireless infrastructure investment in the United States has topped out right now, as of today, at $700 billion. And it still has another 10 years to continue to be invested in. So we're talking near $1 trillion, maybe more, by the time these networks are completely built out. So the technology is here, it's being invested in, it's here today, and it'll continue to get better over time as a result of the competition that's out there and the investment that these carriers, as well as some of these construction and infrastructure management, are running today. So you have the growth of the wireless connectivity, you have the resilience of the different connectivity options, either through satellite, 5G, 4G, and across the different carriers. And then you have the ability to now prioritize those critical cloud applications that you use to run your business over solutions like Bigleaf. So that's absolutely critical. And we've seen the with and without version of those critical applications when you use Bigleaf, and there's up to 40 to 50% improvement in overall application quality when you're using this solution like Bigleaf. So you have this resiliency, you have the competence now to run these business critical applications. And then we talked about POTS replacement. That's all about critical infrastructure. These are life-saving services that are utilized and required by businesses, and they're being supported now. They're being transitioned away from legacy copper services, which we always thought was something that we could rely on that was resilient, to something now that's all the wireless side. And so we're getting even more resiliency, more competence, and more capabilities through that wireless network. And that's just going to continue to expand over the next decade or so. Very exciting time for everybody. I'm excited about the future. Love the partnership that we have with BCN. It goes beyond just a wireless resale relationship. We were friends. We hang out together. We do product development work together. So it's been an incredible journey over the past year or two with the team.
I'll say one thing that expands, Julian, on what you say, because you brought up the customer experience a number of times, and you're talking about the experience that the business to run itself as a business is experiencing. All of these businesses, they offer a customer experience to their customers. And it was a McKinsey study that said the number one differentiator for all businesses, whether you're B2C or B2B today, is CX. And we are so reliant on our networks and the delivery, the capabilities of our services through our networks, that this has an impact all the way down through the ability of your customers and of your customers to actually serve their customers. And I think that's a really strong underlaying underneath all of this. And I just wanted to say thank you for coming together and sharing and expanding our mind on what we can be doing with our networks and the role of wireless going forward. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it very much.